Are you telling me the DA was not ready to file charges and the LAPD said, screw you, we're gonna just arrest him?
That's exactly what I'm hearing.
That's crazy. Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast, Mark. We knew this day was coming where David would be arrested for what authorities say is the murder of Celeste Rivas. But there are bizarre things going on in this case. And I've been dying to talk to you about this because I have never seen anything like it. The LAPD arrests him on Thursday night and then says, we are going to present the case to the DA on Monday. The DA has had this case for 5 months. So the DA is what? Presenting it to itself? They've already had the case. They could, and if they decided not to go for a grand jury indictment, they could have charged him and then immediately arrested him. But so far, he's not been charged. He's been arrested. They're presenting it to the agency that's had the case. What is going on?
First of all, I'm going to bet, and we didn't talk last night. We texted a little bit,
right?
But I'm going to bet the first thing you thought is, like I know, that if there's an arrest on Thursday, that usually means a Thursday indictment. So I'm going to bet that you probably had the same reaction I did, which was it's a grand jury indictment.
It was a grand jury indictment.
Then when you find out it's not a grand jury indictment, you say, oh, the DA must have filed a complaint, meaning they just filed the charges, and instead the probable cause hearing is going to be a preliminary hearing. Well, you go onto the sheriff's website, and guess what? There is no case with a case number. He's just being held. And key fact, he's being held at the 77th Street station, which is an LAPD substation, which means LAPD arrested him, is keeping him at a substation, did not take him to the county jail and have him processed by the sheriff, which speaks volumes here. You want to know what I'm hearing?
Yes, and then I need an answer to why they're doing this. But yeah, what are you hearing?
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, first of all, as we have talked about, the LAPD was at odds with the medical examiner's office.
By the way, if I can interrupt on that, we have been told by a high-level source in LAPD that the medical examiner did find that this was a homicide, that they've ultimately concluded it was a homicide, because for a long time they were uncertain they would ever be able to say what caused her death or what the manner was.
And your source, you're just where I was getting. Your source is absolutely right, because in the timeline, the LAPD and the medical examiner were at odds. The medical examiner was not saying that. Just recently, the medical examiner has apparently revived or has come up with or has come to the conclusion to a medical certainty that it's a homicide. Guess what happened then? Have you heard what happened then? LAPD then tried to get the DA's office to then file. DA's office apparently wouldn't file. So LAPD said, oh, okay, you're not going to file? We're going to go arrest David. We're going to arrest him on a Thursday afternoon. You know why that's significant? Because in LA, we have this quirk, even though I believe it's unconstitutional and does not comport with the San Bernardino case, where if they arrest you late on a Thursday afternoon, you don't get in front of a judge until Monday morning. And that's constitutionally.
You got to stop for a second. Back this up. Are you telling me that you're hearing that the DA was not ready to file charges and the LAPD said, screw you, we're gonna just arrest him, when the DA wasn't ready to file charges? Is that what you're saying?
There is exactly what is happening right now, which is why there is no complaint, why the DA says it's been presented to us, which you outlined is talk about performative arts or theatrics.
I am
Who
shocked.
was leading? What office went to Judge Richmond and got the order? The DA's office. They on behalf of LAPD. What office went in front of the grand jury and hassled witnesses?
The DA.
DA's office. What office dragged the Neo from out of state to LA to put him in front of grand jury?
The
DA's office.
But wait a minute.
Give me another.
But
there's only one other explanation if you want me to speculate, but let's go down here.
Well, no, hold on. Before you speculate, are you saying because that's what I'm hearing, that the DA was not ready to file charges? The LAPD got frustrated and said, "We're just going to arrest him. You got 4 days to file." Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm hearing.
I don't understand that. But Mark, if they're not, if the DA is not ready to file charges and 4 days run out, then David walks free and LAPD has egg on its face.
No, LAPD is then going to point the finger at the DA's office.
And the DA's office is going to say, "We're not ready." Are you?
Yes. And that I'm telling you, that's what's happening. There's only one other explanation that makes any sense whatsoever. And the DA may embrace this if they decide this is too hot for them to just reject. And what the DA would say is on Monday that we've now looked at it. We're now going to file charges, and they'll do a press conference, and they will do the performative arts theatrics that it took them over the weekend to finally realize that they had enough evidence.
Why would LAPD, be in a feud like this? I know what the feud is between LAPD and the medical examiner, but why would the LAPD feud with the DA's office on this? Because ultimately, the DA could just say, the LAPD jumped the gun. We never wanted them to do it, at least now, and that we're trying to get our ducks in a row. And then all of a sudden, the LAPD looks like, why did you put battering rams and canine units and all these people, and it was for show because the DA wasn't ready. I mean, I don't understand it.
Well, look what's happened. When you say you don't understand, now this part I will tell you is speculation. The part about I don't believe that the DA thinks as of yesterday or Wednesday that they had enough to show they have to, when they file a case, they have to believe they can win the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
That is not the standard for LAPD on an arrest.
But the LAPD can only hold him for 4 days legally. And if
they can only hold him technically for 2, but
because of the weekend.
They've kind of the culture, yeah.
Okay.
The culture is they overturned the SCOTUS decision.
I understand, but if you're saying the LAPD is getting frustrated that he wasn't arrested, but he'll be back on the street on Monday if the DA isn't ready, unless you think this just forces the DA's hand which maybe the LAPD is thinking that they have to do it now. But if they do
exactly what the LAPD is thinking. The LAPD thinks that at this point they've played chess, and their move was, we're going to arrest them on a Thursday. You've got 4 days to sit here and have the media kind of bubble up, and you either file or you're going to look, and they're going to say to the DA that the DA just has bungled this. They're going to blame the DA on this.
God, I want to make a phone call so badly right now, but I can't because I'm doing this podcast. I know. So the LAPD,
and I'm surprised your LAPD sources haven't told you.
They
that.
have not. Because, why would they say that?
Let me just ask you a question. When you realized last night, because we're filming this on a Friday,
right?
When you realized it was not an indictment, the knee-jerk reaction was, it's Thursday. They got the indictment. They got him, and then you realize when you do the sheriff's search on the website that there's no case number and that it's a probable cause arrest by LAPD, and he's still in a substation. Why wouldn't you call LAPD at that point?
We called. Look, what we were. This is why I'm asking you, because it did not make sense to me. why would they not first charge him and then arrest him, which is the way it works?
Which is the way it normally works. And by the way, I'm going to harken back to the Harvey Levin disclosure. I don't know if you remember this. I'm sure you do, but you said early on, months and months, maybe 6 months ago on this show, you'd never seen LAPD freeze up on a case, your sources like this case, right?
Yes.
And I'm telling you, there's a reason for that. I mean, part of it has to do with the culture there with the new chief, who's I think one of the best. And I don't often say that about police chiefs, but the problem is in this particular case, there was a great deal of frustration with the medical examiner, which is well documented at this point, which we called out in real time. And now I'm telling you, and by the way, if you can't get Beth Silverman, who is the one who was doing the grand jury, to be a rabid dog when it comes to a prosecution, there are substantial problems with your case.
Well, now, wait a minute.
They are, by the way, if you had somebody in the Clara Shortridge Foltz courthouse, they are feverishly meeting in major crimes. And I'm not going to call out who's in that meeting because then they'll know who's talking. But we know exactly. Craig Hom is in there, Beth is in there, and two others, and Hockman is in there. It is they're feverishly collaborating right now as to what they're going to do.
So did the LAPD blindside the DA's office and arrest him without the DA knowing this was going to happen? Or did they just say, we're doing it whether you file, or how did this come down?
I don't know how it came down. The DA was not expecting.
So the DA was
not expecting, because the DA would have told him, halt, we're going to file a complaint. You got it up. You understand something. Name another single case that you can think of.
I can't.
Where there's been this kind of resources, where this kind of investigation, where the LAPD, first of all, there's never been a case recently that I can think of where the LAPD has been at odds with the ME since the Thomas Noguchi days. But besides that, why in the world would LAPD do it on a Thursday at 5:00 to force the hand of the DA before Monday in court?
So you're saying, I'm just so shocked at this. You're right. I mean, you told me before we started that this was like a bombshell, and I didn't believe you that it was going to be this. But you are saying that the DA was not ready to file this case. The LAPD has been frustrated because they wanted him charged, and they're figuring that we can force their hand by throwing him in jail and starting a 4-day clock where the DA has to file. That's
And by the way,
crazy.
It is crazy. And they're busy trying to come up with a cover story for what's going to happen. If they decide they're not going to file, let me tell you what, I'll give you the prediction. I know exactly what they're talking about. They're going to say, well, this was part of the investigative technique. We wanted to see if he made a phone call to somebody to tell them not to cooperate. We want to see if he would confess to something. We want to see if we could interrogate him, all at the substation. There is a reason that they got him at 77th Street and that they did not take him to IRC. If this was not performative, they would have taken him to the inmate receiving. They would have put him in the what's called the K9.
Yeah, and you know what else, Mark? There were theatrics in this arrest. I mean, the idea that, this guy's standing there saying, "Where do you want me?" And he's, if you move, the dogs are going to bite you. And he's standing there, with a battering ram and dogs and all this. It seemed like some people got tipped off to this happening too.
Oh, it was orchestrated from the get-go. Like, take a look at the tape. I wish you had the tape here.
Believe me, I know this. And it does kind of align with what you're saying, that they wanted this show of force to show that the LAPD was on top of this case. And
exactly.
And I have talked to multiple people in this case, and nobody could understand why they would do it before something was filed. And you're right; it's becoming the only viable answer that they just got frustrated and wanted to arrest this guy.
Correct. They're sitting here saying we're now into April.
Okay.
You already punted us into 2026. We're not going to be deterred here. And you're going to have to figure out your escape strategy, which is, by the way, as we're taping this on Friday afternoon, and they'll come out and deny it on Monday. But I know for a fact they're all meeting right now. As we're taping this on Friday afternoon, there is an all hands on deck meeting in the DA's office,
and an all hands on deck meeting to figure out what the hell they're going to do because this guy's in,
right,
and he could get out on Monday.
By the way. If you're a defense lawyer, if you're Blair Burke or you're Matt or you're one of the others who are handling this case, you could not, you never want your client to be arrested, but this kind of misstep is what a defense lawyer's petri dish.
Can I ask you something? Obviously, you're not going to give up names, but you've kind of made it clear. Can I make an assumption that this is a DA-connected source of yours?
Absolutely. But I want to disclaim that it's anybody in the hierarchy of major crimes because I don't want to burn people who I consider to be friends. But it is not them. But by the way, a visit to the Clara Shortridge Foltz criminal courts building, it is all anybody is talking about.
Okay, I literally can't wait to end the podcast because I want to make a phone call. But before that, I want to tell you something else. And I think this is really interesting. So we have a source connected to the medical examiner's office. And we know that for a long time, their position was we cannot determine cause of death because the body was so decomposed. And that the police were really pushing for an answer, calling it a homicide, as opposed to an accidental death or an undetermined death, which is where it seemed to be possibly heading. And we were even told they may never be able to figure it out. Well, they have now said it's a homicide. I am assuming that one of the things the defense is going to do in this case is subpoena every communication, internal communication, in the medical examiner's office over a period of months to know why it was so hard for them to reach a conclusion. Because then the question is, if you had such a hard time over a period of many months, how did you suddenly determine that it was a homicide? I'm assuming that's going to be a strategy of the defense here.
Oh, this defense is not even going to need to subpoena. One of the interesting quirks here, and you just mentioned you interviewed Matt Murphy, who is a future podcast partner of mine and an ex-Orange County DA. There was a case out of Orange County. The Orange County DA's office took the position that the medical examiner was not part of the prosecution team. And the California Supreme Court said no. They invoked the U.S. Supreme Court, Kyles versus Whitley, and said, if the medical examiner is part of the prosecution team, because he's part of she is part of the prosecution team, that evidence that tends to point towards you didn't do it, the accused did not do it, must be turned over as Brady material. In that case, I believe it's in Ray Brown in California. That case compels the DA to turn over that evidence, which I will tell you is probably in somebody's brain there in the DA's office. How the hell are we going to prosecute a case where we have an absolute duty to turn over all of the medical examiner pushing back against us, trying to get him to say that it was homicide? Right. That's why I say this is a defense lawyer's petri dish with what they're going to be able to do in this case.
Yeah. And my understanding is, they clearly have already come out and said that they're going to prove, they say, that David did not kill Celeste. I will go a step further, that my sense is that they're going to say she wasn't killed at all, that this is going to be some kind of an accidental death,
accidental
an overdose. Because the sense I'm also getting is that they're not necessarily going to say that David didn't know that her body was in the trunk of his car.
And there's a reason for that as well, I'm told. And that's why the DA is so torn on this case. They've got evidence, and we also, again, I hate to keep touting it, but they've got evidence that shows or indicates or is consistent with the fact that he had knowledge.
Yeah. And then the question, if the jury is uncertain if this was an overdose, an accident, murder, that's the reasonable doubt they're looking for. But my understanding is, just the way this is shaped up, is that they're not only saying he didn't murder her. My sense is they're saying it wasn't necessarily even a murder. It wasn't a killing. It wasn't a homicide.
Also, if you play this out, one of the things that we were perplexed about is, why did they drag this kid from the out of state, who was a supposed witness,
Neo.
Yeah, and then did the Instagramming and did the other kinds of things where it looked like he was trying to put distance. And then next thing you know, he goes in for 45 minutes. He's out for 45 minutes.
And by the way, and from what I understand, and I believe what you understand, he was very close to David, and he said, "I don't know anything about this."
And once again, also a dry hole, so to speak, in terms of a prosecutor trying to bring a case.
So
you really want to?
I'm sorry. I'm stunned.
You want to get off of this podcast and you want to make calls.
No, I do. But it's so stunning to me that, because you said yourself, you're a fan of the new police chief.
I am. I think Jim McConnell is I think he's a law enforcement.
I've known him for a long time. Not well, but I kind of have.
For those who don't know, he used to be the sheriff of LA County. I thought he was one of the best sheriffs that we've had.
Yeah, I agree. But this was, the theatrics here, the theatrics do align with what you're saying, that they wanted to make a statement. I don't think they didn't need to do it the way they did it.
Of course they didn't. And by the way, it's out of character to some degree if you think about it. Normally I've had the experience countless times. They'll accommodate you. They understand the problems with people who are high profile or even no profile, where there's a intense media interest. LAPD goes out of their way to try to be accommodating. You don't have to. I could name cases you and I have both been affiliated with over the years where has been a constant theme. So the only way that you give any kind of import to this is exactly what is the scuttlebutt that's running around the criminal courts building.
So what about the grand jury? Because it was 4 months, almost 5. Now, it is kind of weird to me that if this grand jury is hearing all this testimony, why didn't they just make it a grand jury that was going to indict?
Because my understanding is DA did not present them and ask for that.
And that, it seems now to be the case. That's what they're saying, that it was an investigative grand jury.
Well, they say investigative, but they could go either way. They could have asked.
It
reminds me of when somebody tells me the client's a subject or a target. They talk about nonsense.
Exactly. So, if the police force the hand of the DA prematurely, how quickly can the defense go in and argue either insufficiency of evidence or defect in the actual charging document? What can the defense do if the police make the DA jump the gun?
So this is what the kind of the safety valve for the DA. The DA's now got, and that's what they're focused on like a laser right now. They've got to make a decision. Are we going to Monday, or are we going to have him release and say that there's insufficient evidence, we're continuing the investigation?
Which is a screw you to LAPD.
Exactly right. And they're going to say, yeah, you guys jumped the gun, blah, blah, blah. Then the defense is in a position that I don't know how you go forward after that, absent a confession or somebody saying, I was there and this happened.
Well, they've scoured, they've gone everywhere with this grand jury.
Who knows? I mean, yeah, it would not be the first time somebody's been in a substation and there's somebody else in a cell that all of a sudden has a miraculous conversation. I remember 45 years ago that happening in a case that my father tried, where we later had to prove that it was physically impossible for the confession to have been made, but that didn't stop somebody from fabricating a confession by somebody who was in custody. I remember, you're old enough to remember Leslie White, who was featured in 60 Minutes, who was hoodwinking people left and right in the DA's office in Los Angeles County by concocting false confessions. So that's a defense lawyer's biggest nightmare in these kinds of situations. How do you get the client to insulate themselves so nobody fabricates a confession?
Yeah. Are you curious about how this medical examiner reached a conclusion of homicide so many months after they started looking?
No, I mean, I know what happens. I hate to say that, but once again, I'm a cynic. I've seen it often enough. If the medical examiner gets enough pressure, the medical examiner folds. They're not supposed to. They deny it. They get on the stand and they deny it. But unfortunately, that's what happens. A medical examiner is like any other human. You put enough pressure on them and they fold.
But they were in a feud with the LAPD, and they were in a very uncharacteristic way. They stood up to the LAPD, and they bristled at the LAPD wanting to make everything secret. And so this isn't a medical examiner who shies away from confrontation. So,
well, the DA's office and the investigators had also gone outside of the medical examiner's office. There were other people who were consulted. There were other experts that were consulted. So it would very easily be one of these situations where they say, now we've got a forensic anthropologist, we've got a person who's an expert in a particular niche area of science, so-called science, to come in and render an opinion. And now, based on that opinion, I was on the fence on undecided, and now I'm leaning towards homicide. The trial I had this year, I got a medical examiner to admit under cross-examination that, in fact, he had originally been undecided, and then more information was given to him, and he changed his mind. I mean, there's nothing corrupt about that, so to speak, but you just have to kind of analyze what the steps are and what the thinking process is and whether they documented it in real time.
So we now know, based on our sources, that the medical examiner has said the manner of death is homicide as opposed to accident or undetermined. That doesn't necessarily mean that they know the cause of death, because we haven't heard that yet. How was she, if she was killed, how?
The manner of death is homicide is fascinating also. I mean, did your source say what that meant?
No.
What that meant?
No, just that it was an unlawful killing at the hands of another.
The hands of another. You could make an argument, by the way, that could be somebody who was slipped some drug that was laced with fentanyl.
Well, how do you? No, nope. The coroner can't determine who slipped the drug. I mean, the coroner looks at the body and looks at the forensics, but the coroner doesn't try the case and say somebody gave them.
But the coroner could say, this is not a substance that would be found naturally producing in the body.
But that could be an overdose, Mark. That could be somebody.
Correct. But an overdose could still be, you could still fashion criminal or say it's a homicide, because you could say that the drugs that were given to the person go no farther than Matthew Perry.
Well, with Matthew Perry, I guess they did say didn't No, did the coroner and Matthew Perry say overdose? I don't know that they said homicide.
There's ketamine intoxication,
right? But that's
and
not
drowning. But it was a drowning. But that wasn't ruled.
The
coroner didn't rule it as accidental.
No, I think they said it was an overdose. I don't think. I think they did. I think they did.
Ended up fashioning liability. I know because I defended the case.
No.
They ended up fashioning liability based on something that scientifically I think was impossible. But that's a whole different story.
Well, no. The DA turned it into a homicide because they found out who was giving him the drugs and how many and all that.
Actually, the DA wouldn't file it. It was the U.S. attorney who came up with this fanciful theory.
Fair enough. But I guess what I'm saying is that I don't know if it's cocaine or heroin, that they're not going to be able to say.
I agree, but if you did a tox screen and you found fentanyl, then you surmise.
People use fentanyl. People actually knowingly use fentanyl.
People knowingly use ketamine. That hasn't stopped anybody. In fact, there are therapeutic uses for ketamine. That doesn't stop this particular medical examiner from saying different things about the use of ketamine.
Well, but
apparently, if you believe what you read, titans of industry are regularly using ketamine.
I know. So if somebody dies of a ketamine overdose, they're not going to say homicide. They're going to say accidental overdose, and that's
where we part ways. In the hands of a very clever prosecutor, they can ignore the science.
Well, yeah, the prosecutor can, but not the medical examiner. That's what I'm saying.
Except the medical examiner at a certain point gets kind of pushed into a spot where they do something.
Okay. I want to make a phone call. So
you make your phone call. If it's a good phone call, come back to me.
Okay, but take my call as opposed to sending me to voicemail because I think I'm going to call you in 10 minutes.
Bye.
See ya.